when you're moving from place to place.
Good morning and welcome back to the Tobago Updates Youth Morning Show. Now, viewers, political scandals is something that we usually see on TV shows or even in the United States of America. However, within the past 2 months, we have observed one right here in Tobago titled Audiogate. Now, joining us this morning to have discussions about that scandal is no stranger to us here in Tobago or Tobago Updates. It's Mr. Leroy George. A special morning to you, Mr. George. And how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing, sir?
We are doing great, and we are thankful to have you here on Tobago Updates. And I'm joined by
Dwayne, Nurse, good morning to you, Mr. George.
Good morning, Mr. Nurse. How are you?
I'm fine, thanks. It's always a pleasure to have you here, man.
Lovely, lovely.
So, Mr. George, let's get the discussion going. And I just want to start the discussion asking you your general thoughts on this entire Audiogate scandal.
No problem. My thoughts are as such. White-collar crime is something that I think Tobagonians as a people, we have not yet begun to connect societal harm with white-collar crime. And as a result of that, when we see the police treating with these low-risk, high-reward types of crime that we would usually attribute to the upper echelon of society as if it was blue-collar crime, which we most often attribute to persons of low income usually. There is a sincere feeling of indignation amongst persons who would subscribe to an unspoken yet very real system of hierarchy here in the Tobago space. It's not uncommon worldwide. As a matter of fact, according to Dr. Michael Gallis of the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners in Austin, Texas, people did not even recognize white-collar crime. There wasn't even a terminology. The terminology white-collar crime did not exist until after the Great Depression in the United States. And as a result of that, they asked themselves, what went wrong? Why did our economy collapse in this way? And as a result, one criminologist, I would assume him to be a criminologist, definitely a scientist of some sort, he came up with the term white-collar crime. And so we see legislature happening after 1940 globally. And one of the legislature or examples of legislation that we've seen is that in the 1980s, right here in Trinidad and Tobago, we had the Prevention of Corruption Act. And that is an act that I'm pretty sure the police is looking into with this particular Audiogate situation. And the Prevention of Corruption Act, just like white-collar crime, it is something that is difficult for a lot of Tobagonians to wrap their minds around. And not just Tobagonians, but people around the world who are accustomed seeing persons get away with this. As you would have mentioned at the beginning of the interview, we usually see political corruption of this sort on television. It's kind of new to the Tobago space. And I think people need to understand that white-collar crime, even though we're not as associated with it or we're not as accustomed to it, because it happens a lot, but we're not accustomed to seeing things operate the way it's happening. It is something that is not victimless. White-collar crime is not victimless, and as a result, we need to have a conversation with ourselves as Tobagonians so we could understand exactly what we're dealing with, so we know how to feel about it and how to react to it.
Mr. George, so you're saying that that unfamiliarity is what's causing that uproar that we're seeing here in Tobago, right?
Yes, certainly.
Okay, I'll hand you over to Dwayne.
All right. So you mentioned in your preamble that the whole notion of white-collar crime being a concept that is new, especially given the current climate now. And so is it that you're saying that you feel a sense that perhaps that there's a potential that those culpable in this Audiogate there would be no justice?
Oh no, I feel as though very likely there will be justice if the persons are in fact guilty, as it pertains to the Prevention of Corruption Act. My reading of it, my understanding of it, and my listening of the Audiogate, I feel as though they are guilty. However, it is not up to me, it's not up to you, it's up to the judicial system of Trinidad and Tobago to determine that that is in fact the case. And if that happens, I feel as though the punishment for this particular crime, and I'm specifically again speaking to the Prevention of Corruption Act. I understand that they also looking at Integrity in Public Life Act also. However, I feel as though it's a more clear-cut case where the Prevention of Corruption Act is concerned, Section 2 and 3. When you look at the punishment, it's actually pretty heavy punishment. The punishment is as high as 10 years in prison, a fine of $500,000, and of course you have to remit office. And so that sounds kind of harsh, but when you understand why there are legislation or there is legislation against white collar crime, you understand that even though the act itself may be mild, the repercussions of the act could be very problematic. We see here in the Tobago space that in the last year we saw a shrinking of our economy. A recession is described as 2/4 of a fiscal year going in the negative direction, as in you have shrinkage in contrast to growth taking place. And we saw an entire year of shrinkage taking place, according to Dr. Vanish James, in the Tobago space. And that is exactly the kind of stuff that white collar crime causes. It causes societal damage, not individual damage as much. And that's why as individuals, we may not take it as seriously. But as a society, we need to take it as seriously. And that's why the punishment is as harsh as it is.
All right. So my other question is, do you think that given that these are the preliminary stages, because we saw I think over the weekend and during the week that the police would have made several visits to several persons that they believe are culpable or that will be lent towards the case. Do you think that it's too early to call foul? Meaning, do you think it's too early in these preliminary stages to say that they are guilty and etc.? Given that this process takes, it's quite a lengthy process, given the nature of and the magnitude of this case.
Yes, it's way too early. And I'm hearing language being used in the Tobago space that would insinuate that persons have been found guilty or of wrongdoing, etc. And that just isn't true. And the language I'm speaking about, people talking about police raids. The police aren't raiding the homes of these individuals. They're searching the homes of these individuals, and they're in the investigation stage. So there is no need for a particular alarm. You would have made mention, I believe there was a second part to your question. What was the second part? Just remind me again.
Do you think it's too well, my question really was, do you think it's too early to call
It's too early.
Yeah. Right. So thank you.
Okay, Mr. George. So in your penultimate response, you would have stated that the penalties for white collar crimes to be harsh. And from a legal angle, you would have let us know that it's a very harsh punishment. However, let's shift the angle a bit to when they were campaigning. They would have campaigned to basically be everything that the past administration is not. So they would have stood on integrity, to have morals, to not be in the corruption, the nepotism. Basically, they were the opposite of the People's National Movement. And the Audiogate would have revealed to us behaviors that we would have particularly expected to see from the past administration or even Mr. Duke himself. And now we're hearing it from the people who were voted into office mainly because of their moral values. What are your thoughts on that difference? That difference that we would have seen to what they would have said during the campaign trail to what we would have heard them discussing in the audio?
Well, first thing first, I would be very careful with assuming that everyone would assume that the type of behavior that we saw when we heard when we heard that audio recording is something that we'd attribute to, say, Watson Duke or to the PNM. I myself would have been an employee of Watson Duke as the research officer in the office of the minority leader when he was the minority leader. And I must say the standards that was passed on to me by that individual were very high standards, to the point which but I heard Mr. Watson Duke say that if he was in the room, he would have scrapped that conversation at its inception. And I too would have scrapped that conversation at its inception because of the training I would have gotten from Mr. Watson Duke. And also I would have heard the Prime Minister of this country say that what happened there would never happen in the PNM. Now, you and I probably on the same page, or a lot of other people and I probably on the same page. I would have probably expected that kind of behavior from the PNM. And I understand that a large percentage of the people in the Trinidad and Tobago space would have expected that from Watson Duke. But we have to also respect the opinions of persons who happen to not be ourselves. And so I needed to make mention of that. That being said, it is very important to understand that when we look at democracy, and I'm hearing a lot of the supporters of this administration bringing up the topic of democracy and saying that our democracy is under attack. When you look at democracy, democracy speaks to voting. And when you look at that ballot paper, you saw the acronym PDP, which represented a mandate. And we also saw the names of the candidates. Now we're not seeing that PDP anymore, and so that does take away from some legitimacy from the administration. But we're also seeing a disconnect from the mandate. And had they stuck to the mandate, we would not be in the situation that we're having right now, because the mandate that this particular THA Executive Council was elected on was one of extreme transparency, and that is what we could hold against them. Extreme transparency is what was, and accountability is what was promised to us. It did not happen. I think probably they thought it would have been to our demise or somebody else's demise other than their own demise, but we see that it is happening to their demise at this point. And on that point, I want to bring up that at 10 o'clock today, we're going to see a meeting taking place in the Tobago House of Assembly, which I consider to be a bit hypocritical, because you chose to go away from the mandate which you were able to get yourself elected. And now I believe they're going to make a call to the people of Tobago to join them in some false and improper and ill-displaced sense of indignation towards the police doing their job exactly as they're supposed to do it. And we know that it's exactly how they're supposed to do it, because these are the procedures which they follow when addressing blue-collar crime. I'm going to remind the people of Tobago that when they're speaking in the Tobago House of Assembly, they will be speaking from a point of parliamentary privilege. And what that means is that whatever is said by them is not necessarily or cannot be used to bring them into any kind of harm in terms of the judicial system, in terms of law, etc. And so we need to take everything that we hear in this sitting with a pinch of salt. I'm hearing talks of potential protest, and even one or two persons speaking of riot, etc. And what I would suggest to these persons, pay attention to the persons that may be motivating you in a particular direction. If they're not doing what they're asking you or insinuating or pushing you in a direction of doing, then you're probably getting set up. You probably need to be a little bit more sober-minded as we go forward.
Thank you, Mr. George. My question is now on the premise of prior allegations in this space from all other political parties. We've had allegations all about the place, or whether it be on political platforms, etc. But however, there has always been this complaint and clarion call for the police to do their job expeditiously in bringing redress and justice to the people who might be so aggrieved by these allegations of corruption in political parties. Do you commend in the police for moving so expeditiously in this case? But given that it has just been, I think the Audiogate came out about 2 to 3 months ago.
Yes, I definitely commend the police in moving expeditiously. I think it should be pointed out that when you look at the Prevention of Corruption Act, there is a time limit which the police have in order to actually make the arrest and even go forward well after it hands over to the judicial system. The system and all may have a time limit in which to act before this actual situation expires, almost like a sometimes when enough time passes, I can't remember the legal terminology, the statutes of limitations is almost like that, but it's really, really amplified to the point where it's only about a year we have to make things happen. So yes, I do commend the police for the speed at which they're operating, not only in this case, but in general, because in recent times we saw one PNM MP was arrested and charged, even while the PNM was in office. That is Miss Marilyn or something like that. And we also saw in times past that even a former prime minister was given 2 years. He was sentenced to 2 years. He only did a couple weeks, if memory serves me correct, for failure to declare his assets. And that's an example of white collar crime. And it's a very good example when examining this situation next to, because in that case, persons would have said, failure to declare your assets, you're not actually even doing anything. You actually did not do something, which is why he would have been sentenced. And so we need to weigh against the examples that we've seen in the past, be it in the far past with the UNC or in the close past with the PNM. And we have to see, I would have to say that the police is showing the level of impartiality that they should be showing and that I have grown accustomed to seeing. I commend the police to the fullest.
All right. So my next question is, there are two gates in this space, the audio gate and the audit report gate, the audit gate. Do you see the same credence given or energy given to the audio gate in light of this issue? Hence the reason my previous question. And I remember you mentioned about democracy, but the concern about democracy, do you believe that the same energy is given to the audit report, the audit gate? And do you, if not, do you see this as a concern for the democracy, given your previous response?
Not just yet am I seeing persons really excited and talking about the audit report as we're seeing with the audio gate. However, concern, there is none. I have no concern whatsoever. I suspect that persons who do not like this administration, for want of a better wording, will be emphasizing on the audio gate, and then persons who would support this administration, and I mean that is biased in both cases, but it is the reality, would point to the audit report more so than the audio gate. However, unfortunately, the audit report has not yet been made public, and it is important that we remember that the public paid for this, public purse. And even with the audio gate, if you want to make a real connection between the audio gate and the audit report, is about misappropriation of public funds. Public funds paid for this audit report, and as a result, the public should have access to this audio report so that we could have a real conversation, a level conversation, a democratic conversation, and betterment could be had, and an improvement of us as a society.
Okay, so Mr. George, this conversation was flowing so amazing, but unfortunately time is of the essence. So we'll have to stop right here, and I really hope we could have the opportunity to continue this conversation, very informative conversation. So I want to thank you once again for joining us here on the Youth Show. We're going to take a quick break, viewers, and we'll be right back.